Welcome to the Ask More Questions podcast. I'm in between guests right now. It's that time of year when people are recovering from the holidays, I think. And I've had my own amount of recovering to do because in January, my aunt died. And, she'd been sick for a while. Had some issues with her lungs, which of course affects other parts. And then eventually her body just couldn't keep up. My aunt was incredibly nice, totally wonderful person, had a wonderful upbringing with her. She lived several hours away, so I didn't get to see her a whole lot. But when I did, it was always great, always amazing, because she was such a nice person. And so we, being my family and I, made the 3 hour trip to go down and attend for the funeral. And uh, it was one of those things where I had to have a little huddle with my immediate family, my wife and my kids, and kind of give them some ground rules before we went. Because I had to tell them and say, listen, here's the deal. We were at the hotel and getting ready to leave to go to the church. And I said, kids, gather around. I want to talk to you about something. I said, you need to understand that this side of the family is very religious. And you're probably going to hear a lot of God talk today and a lot of religion talk and discussions about going to a better place, et cetera, et cetera. And I said, what I need from you is to just play along respectfully. And everybody understood what I meant by that. We were going to understand that this wasn't about us, it was about them, about the grieving, about those left behind. And we needed to just be cool. That's pretty much it. Just be cool, you know. And I said, you don't have to bow your heads when they pray, but if you decide to do that, you can always just go to a happy place and think about something else, or you can sit there. But I said, we won't be getting into any kind of discussions about belief, unbelief, anything like that. So we go to the funeral, and the funeral was exactly what I would expect because it was in a Southern Baptist church. And based upon me poking around the video archives, I got just a hint of Christian nationalism kind of seeping in through the sermons. So I knew I had that to look at. Now, the interesting thing about this church is that my aunt and uncle went there as long as I could remember. And it's in a part of town that has been left behind. Specifically, this is in Wichita, Kansas. And it's a part of town that had been kind of left behind, except the church was nice. And that's one of those interesting little tidbits that I tend to see with churches, that even if they're in a bad part of town, well, the church is nice. But anyway, so we go in, and one of the things I noticed, because it is Kansas and because it is Christian and Christian nationalist, I did notice that there was a guy that was probably running defense, which I don't fault him for that, but he did have a visible weapon on him. If you don't know, there are kind of two different types of holsters that you can get. You can get a inside the waistband to where it kind of tucks in. It's nice and concealed. No one would ever know that you have it unless unless it's a big gun and you're wearing tight clothes. And then you have an outside the waistband holster, and his was definitely outside the waistband. Everybody could tell. Plus his shirt was tucked in, and he looked like Mark Driscoll, so it was kind of weird. So, we're just sitting there, hanging out in the back, watching a slideshow. People, they did songs, Christian songs I've heard a million times before because I was raised in the Southern Baptist Church as well. So yeah. none of this was unfamiliar to me. And the kids, they played along so well. They did so great. Um, there was at least 3 prayers during the funeral, and, we went to the graveside services afterwards, which was, just you just go, preacher says a few words, and then that pretty much wraps up the event, so to speak. There was prayer there, and then they said, "Hey, if you want, you can come back to the church. We're gonna do lunch." I'm like, "Yeah, lunch sounds great." So, I went back, with the family, and, we all, um, huddled in the church basement, and right before we had lunch, of course, there was, like, easily a 5-minute long, uh diatribe about, God and being right with God and blah, blah, blah. And so, again, nothing unexpected to me. This all, ever, all of this has happened before and all of this will happen again. That's a quote from Battlestar Galactica. Anyway, so, we have lunch, and one of the great things is that my aunt liked to make, peach cobbler for me whenever I was younger. She knew it was my favorite, because I told her a lot, "I really like your peach cobbler." And sure as shit, I was so excited. One of my cousins came over and said, "Hey, wanted to let you know there's peach cobbler here." I'm like, "Fuck yeah." I didn't say that, but you get my drift. So I was pretty excited because it just kinda wrapped everything together. Um, there was only one thing that really kind of made me sad as I was leaving uh, the sanctuary, the main area that you would congregate to watch the funeral. As we were started to leave, they put the slideshow back up, and I was looking at the pictures of my aunt, and I saw one that I was like, "Oh, they got to you too." And it was a shirt that she was wearing, very pretty blue shirt in this picture, very fun lettering, and it said, "America First." Now, by itself, that doesn't sound bad, but whenever you know that America First is tied to things like Christian nationalism and just this extreme level of patriotism that has found its way into the evangelical church, my heart sank a little bit because I was like, oh, damn, they got to her. And she probably didn't even know. I'm guessing she probably doesn't know all of those ties and how that all works. But whatever. So, we tell everybody our goodbyes and we make the 3-hour trip back. And it was over. And I told my kids, I'm like, I'm so proud of you guys. You guys handled this event very well, and you played along nicely, and nobody got up in arms about any kind of debate, which I'd be happy to have, but time and place, right? Time and place. So a couple of weeks passed. I'm down in my home gym, plodding away on the treadmill, and I get a text, and it's from my uncle. And I'm like, whenever you get a video and you see the first image, what they call the poster, the first image, the first frame of the video. And I'm like, and it's my aunt. She's in the hospital and she's got oxygen on her. And I'm like, oh, I wonder what this is. I kind of had a feeling, but I hit play and it was a message. And one of my cousins, you can hear her off in the distance. And she says, Gene, this is for you. And then it cuts to my aunt. And in between breaths, as she struggled, she said this: I just want to tell you that Jesus loves you. You need to find your way back to Jesus. Figure out your life because you know the truth for you and your children. Love you. Friends, let me tell you, I was stunned. Because if there was a beyond the grave message that I would have liked to receive, it would have been as simple as, I just want to let you know that I love you and love your children, love your wife. It's been a privilege to be part of your life. Thank you for being a part of mine. Something like that. But that's not what I got. Instead, I got one more sermon, and I had to process it for a little while. I had to really think about it because I'm also not terribly surprised by that. Kind of went along with the whole theme anyway. But what I was surprised by is that I had went to great lengths to tell my family and my kids to be respectful of other people's beliefs. In a time, there's a time and place for debate. There's a time and place to discuss. Um, and I think we should discuss it. But I didn't feel like the funeral was the right place, and I probably would have deferred anyway if anybody wanted to talk about it. But then I don't think the time and place was right to preach to me from your deathbed when you know I no longer believe what I used to believe. And whenever I talk about to others that I believe that Christianity is a cult and that all religions are cults, this is the kind of shit I'm talking about. It takes over people's minds. It allows them to not think clearly and rationally. I'm sure to her, she thought that she was doing what she was supposed to do. But yet she did it at the expense of any respect to me, and that bothers the shit out of me. But I wanted to be clear, so I called the cousin who was at the beginning of the video, and I just wanted to get a little backstory. And I was super nice. Oh my God, I was so nice. I just absolutely did not do anything to ruffle any feathers. I just said, hey, I was just kind of curious. It was kind of weird to get that. And she's like, yeah, sorry about that. I thought it was weird too. You know, to just kind of like send something like that. But that's something that she wanted to do. And I said, oh, well, I can go along with that. You're on your deathbed. You feel like you have unsaid things. And you feel this urgency that I got to say something. Got to get it in one last time. So I reluctantly, mentally, accepted it from the standpoint of you're on your deathbed. But then my cousin and I, we did talk a little bit more about that. She's like, well, you know, Mom thought that, you know, she had a feeling that you were no longer a believer. And I said, oh, yeah, yep, totally true. I don't believe in that stuff anymore. And she's just like, well, I just encourage you to, you know, dig deeper. I said, I've done so much digging. I continue to do digging because, frankly, now I'm interested to find out. The more I dig, the more it strengthens my position that there is no God, there's no heaven, there's no hell. That mankind made up all of this stuff, and we keep buying into religion because it's just like this generational virus that won't go away. And I told her, I'm like, yeah, I've really looked into it. I'm like, this is all mythology. These are all just stories, and I'm okay with that. And she's like, well, I don't know. I'm like, that's fine, you know, but I've looked into it. I said, I encourage you to look into it. And we had a nice chat. You know, we kind of ended with just some small talk about the kids and how at the time there was some illness going through my household with the kids and what we're going to do on the weekend and so on and so forth. And that was it. And I just want to, if I could get this message out there kind of my own way. You could choose not to say that, not to listen to this. So feel free to turn it off now if you don't want to be anti-preached to. But I would like for you to consider that this thing takes over people's brains and causes them to do things like absolutely disrespect someone else's beliefs or non-beliefs because you think your way is right. Now, I know what you're thinking. You're saying, well, Gene, don't you think that your way is right? Yes, that's absolutely true. And the reason why I think that is because it seems I've concluded that I cannot find any sufficient evidence to believe that any of this is true. But there seems to be a lot of evidence on the contrary. But you have to get out of your bubble and go look for it. And you have to ask yourself, is there any other possible conclusion that I can draw besides God or gods did this? If I give you a naturalistic explanation, I think that you should consider it. You should think about that. Because if I ask you to prove that God is real, heaven is real, the devil is real, hell is real, you're going to tell me something about like, well, I just have faith. And, I mean, faith isn't always a bad thing. Like, I have faith that my coworker will show up tomorrow. Well, probably not tomorrow because this is the weekend, but I have faith that my coworker that reports to me will show up to work. But if I'm given new evidence, like a quick text message that says, hey, man, I'm sick, I can't make it in, or hey, my sister's going through some stuff and I need to go be there for her, and then I'll know. So I move from belief into knowledge that he won't be there. I can't find that with any kind of religious belief where the outcome leaves me with no other explanation okay, let me rephrase that. I can't find that in a religious belief where I get to the point where I eliminate things and the only thing left is, well, surely it must be a God that I can't touch, that I can't feel, taste, smell. But I can tell you that there are people that have heard God's voices, because there's multiple gods. And they, some of them need medication. And I don't mean that in a derogatory way at all. Sometimes they really do because they have a condition or an illness that has interacted with their physical body and their brain, their mind, and their processes that causes them to believe they are hearing voices. I found interesting things on the internet about real, true studies about different chemicals or technological advancements that can cause you to see things that aren't there. So if you think that you see something, it is possible that it was done through an external mechanism that is not God. I used to not believe in evolution because I was taught that God did it. But then whenever you look around at the world and start to see similarities, one of the big things for me is whenever we got cats, and I noticed standing above them as they swarmed around my feet for treats, that from my vantage point, they kind of looked like snakes. Pointy head, elongated tail, skinny bodies. And I was like, that's interesting. So I just go to the web and I ask a question. And I say, do cats share a common ancestor with snakes? And it turns out the answer is yes. According to evolution, they do. People smarter than I have researched these things, ran tests, models, predictions, and they figured it all out. We can look at the genetic code of primates and see that they share 98% of our DNA. Fascinating. It's just absolutely fascinating. And it makes sense. Go to a zoo, hang out with the primates. We didn't evolve from monkeys. We share a common ancestor, which is different. And whenever you start to learn that and see how all that works, whenever you start to find out more about, like, how did planets get formed? How did life begin? You hear concepts like abiogenesis. I just read a story where I think it was NASA they took samples from an asteroid that was way out in Timbuktu and middle of nowhere, take a right in space, brought it back to Earth, looked at the samples. They found the building blocks of life on a rock. Which is more plausible? Is it more plausible that in space something happened, like a collision, and these building blocks of life had some sort of reaction, and then over long ass periods of time that it created the world? And by create, I don't mean a creator. I mean that it led to one thing after another. Or is it more plausible that a deity, and you can't tell me which one because there are so many of them, that a deity or deities made everything come into existence? Now, I can't prove that. It's not sufficient evidence. I don't know. I guess that's a thing for you to think about. And I find, to bring this back to death and my aunt and my parents, I never got a chance to have any kind of discussion about this with my parents because, when my mom died, I was still a believer. And by the time I reached this conclusion when my dad was still alive, his mind wasn't at a place where he could comprehend it, unfortunately. So I never got to sit down and have just a grown-up discussion about it. And then I get this message from beyond the grave from my aunt. I just want to tell you that Jesus loves you. You need to find your way back to Jesus. Figure out your life because you know the truth for you and your children. Yeah, I do know the truth. The truth is that you can't rely on superstitions to be truth, because there could be, and more often than not is, a logical explanation for things. And it seems to me that we have things that can be explained and things that can't be explained because we just don't know yet. We have many incidences of those types of we don't know yet happening in history, and how some of those people that were ridiculed or even killed because they said, I don't think this is God. I think this is something else. Everybody else was just so sure. I'm sure they had people telling them, like, man, you need to figure out your life. You know the truth. If I could have one thing, I would ask the evangelical church to shut the fuck up. Stop doing this to people. Stop forcing your beliefs on other people, because this is just leading to a battle. If you would just shut up, then maybe people that don't believe the same way as you wouldn't feel so hard, feel like they needed to push back so hard. They don't listen. They're absolutely 100% sure that they have to tell you about their beliefs and get it out, because your soul's in danger of hell, which seems like a pretty unjust punishment for not being able to come to a conclusion of belief by something that can't be proven. Have a good day. Have a good weekend. Signing off for now.